Welcome to this episode of the Gunman. So this video here is the second vid I'm doing on my VL Turbo project. This video here we're going to be mainly focusing just on this boot lid here. I'll give you guys a quick look at some of the other work that I'm doing at the same time. So there's a little bit of rust on the inside of that boot, so I've given it a good spray down with the rust converter. Oztech rust converter is the stuff I'm using. There's loads of different brands out there. Just ask your paint supplier if you need to get some. So this was a boot that I thought was going to be in better condition. It looked like a tiny little bubble of rust, but as you can see it ended up being quite a substantial amount of rust in there. So I decided that the light hail damage that I had on the black boot lid would probably even be easier to fix and hopefully last longer than what that boot there would have. You may be wondering why all that yellow paint's all over it, but some of my common followers that have seen the furniture restoration I did on the spun fiberglass furniture, I thought it would be a good idea just to get that up off the ground when I was painting that. And being that I never thought I was going to use that boot lid, I didn't bother covering it, so I ended up getting covered in that yellow paint. So to remove that, I've just got a piece of 80 grit with the interface pad there to start off with, and then I've removed that interface pad because, as you can see, there's the boot lid spoiler sits over there, and someone's just painted that black. It's been actually done a couple of times in black, but they never bothered to remove the boot spoiler, so it's got a big thick edge there. So that's why I've removed the interface pad to help actually get that edge down a bit before I go and paint it. And next up, I've found there was only really one small piece of rust, just that bit there, so I've just sanded it right back. I treated it on the inside with that rust killer, and next up I'm just going to get my hammer, just the back of my hammer, and smash it into a low spot, and that's just going to give something for the fiberglass filler that I'm about to use to stick to. So yeah, I mean, the way I see it, if I get a couple of years out of it, I'm happy, you know. Even if in 3 years I've got to just paint that section of the boot again, I'm not fussed. I mean, to do it real properly, you could probably cut that out and weld a section in, but I just couldn't be bothered, to be honest, and I didn't really think that the job warranted it. So yeah, that's that fiberglass, the U-Pole fiber filler I'm using. Great stuff. It goes really hard, and it really does seem to actually last quite a long time. And all you do is just use normal bog hardener, just normal body filler hardener. They say that the mixing ratio for that is about 50:1, but I've never seen anyone actually measure it out. It would be pretty hard to actually measure. You always just do it by eye. And look, by looking at this, it might even just have a touch too much in, but a little bit too much, or a little bit, it's not really going to make that much of a difference. And I'm just taking a couple of minutes just to push it right into that hole, so it's going to be gripping in from behind as well. Now, next up, you might be wondering what I'm doing here, but I'm doing something a little bit different. It can be done, it's stepping out of the box a little bit, but basically, you can see I've got these two different body fillers. One's just a rough filler and one is a fine filler. So that big can that I'm opening up here, that's a rough filler. It's prone to get pinholes, and it's not really recommended to be used over paint. But the other one on the right, that small can, that Worth polyester fine filler, that can be used over paint. However, it's a little bit, it goes a bit stickier, so when you go to rub it out, it'll clog the sandpaper up a little bit more. So what I'm actually doing is mixing both of them together, so well, hopefully it's going to make it so I'm able to go over the paint, but it's going to make it rub back a bit easier for me. So I've done this a few times, and it's worked quite well for me. I've finished painting this boot lid now, and I haven't got any shrink back yet. Hey, I'll keep in touch with you guys about how this car ends up going along, and yeah, I'll give you a touch base in another 6 months, do another video on it, and see how it's holding up. But yeah, look, that wasn't any specific ratio. I just went about half-half, sort of half fine filler, half rough filler, and same thing, just a touch of the hardener. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure anyone that's mixed up bog has put a touch too much in before, and everyone's put not enough in before, and yeah, the result is too much. It's going to go hard too quick, and it'll actually stay a little bit cheesy, and not enough, it'll just never go hard, or it'll take a very long time to go hard if it even ever does go hard. So you soon learn. It doesn't take long to learn the right amount with the hardeners. And yeah, I'm just taking that little bit of extra time when I'm applying, running my hand over it to find the lows and the highs. this boot lid, it wasn't in the best way. It had some light hail damage. It's nothing compared to the Toyota Echo that you guys might have seen me do. I did a series, I think it was 6 or 7 part series on my little Toyota Echo, and that had extreme hail damage, whereas this, it's just much lighter. So I always like to use a nice wide applicator when I'm putting in big areas of filler. Noticing using something the size of a credit card, because you're just not going to be able to get it in fine enough. Obviously you need to have a little bit more than what you need, because you need to be able to sand that down till it is perfect. But yeah, if you put too much in, you're just going to be there sanding and sanding and sanding forever. And what you can sometimes do if you're not careful is sand low spots into it next to where the filler is high, and you can end up just making it worse. So as far as drying times go, it's basically about 10 to 15 minutes usually sees most fillers dry if you put the right amount of hardener in. Obviously temperature is always going to play a part in stuff like that. Yeah, in the extremely cold climates, yeah, it's going to take a little bit longer, but in a warm environment, sometimes it'll be like hard to rub in 5 minutes. So I've decided to include, I've just put some text layers in there for you guys, so you can see exactly the sandpapers and the grits that I'm using and stuff like that. So I've just started off just by knocking the top off of it with some 80 grit, with the orbital sander with no interface pad. And next up, I've just got some 40 grit on the 3M thin block, so it's a 3M purple sandpaper there. It's got the Velcro back on it with these blocks, and this block here, it's actually capable of, you can plug it up to your vacuum cleaner and it's got the holes in it, so it's similar to the orbital sander where you can use the dust extraction with it if you like. But personally, I find it just annoying, and the lead just gets in my way, so I don't usually use it, but I do like the setup. Now you do have to be very careful if you use 40 grit over filler that you've put on top of paintwork, because that 40 grit's just going to rip into your paintwork and make a total mess out of it if you're not careful. But if I was to go straight to 80 grit with the block, I'll be there for a hell of a lot longer. So I'm just trying to knock the bulk of it down with the 40 grit first, and just trying to concentrate it just onto where the filler areas are without going too far out where the painted surface is. And if you do get any, make sure you do remove those 40 grit scratches. You might get away with saying 80 grit scratch to prime over, but if you prime over a 40 grit, you're going to have a big lot of shrink back, and you also run the risk of having fry ups and stuff like that. So yeah, as you see, I'm just continuing blocking. I have cut a lot of the footage out because, I mean, you probably got half an hour just of sanding just on that one panel, so it would get a bit boring just watching me block the whole thing down. And as I go along, just always checking it by hand. At this stage, prior to putting primer on it, I don't usually like to wet check it, but later on, after we've got some primer on it, it's a good idea to get some wax and grease remover, otherwise known here as Prepsol. Get that in the atomizer bottle, so the pump spray bottles. Pump it up, and or you can just get it on a rag if you wish, and just get a nice wet coat of Prepsol over the whole thing, and that's going to give you a wet finish over it, so you'll be able to see any highs and lows, and you'll know if you need to either refill, reprime, or reblock any areas. So next up here, you'll be able to see I've actually done quite a good job at keeping the worst of these 40 grit scratches away from the paintwork. I'll give you a good look up close. And next up, I'm taking that piece of 40 grit off, and I'll be putting a piece of 80 grit on. A nice fresh piece of sandpaper. Some people are real tight asses with sandpaper and stuff like that, and I believe that you need to use a nice new piece, and it's really going to cut into it. If I use a couple of bits of sandpaper on one panel, I'm not fussed. I mean, a couple of bits of sandpaper isn't going to send you out of business, and the way I look at it is, if you use an old piece of sandpaper, then it doesn't cut right through. It's going to sand either side of it. So you see where that black paint is either side, you'll be sanding more of that than what you will of the filler where you want to be sanding, and then you won't actually get it nice and straight. And that's from years of experience. And look, where I can save a couple of dollars here and now, I always do. I mean, yeah, it's my own shop. I'm not going to be throwing pieces of sandpaper away just for the sake of it, but at the end of the day, the job comes first, and if you're not making enough money on that job, well then, you know, that's not my fault. Like, if there's not enough money, if your boss isn't quoting enough money, that's why I've even said to previous bosses, it's like, oh man, you know, you should use that piece of sandpaper a bit longer. And I said, mate, it's done. Like, that has made its money, you know. And the way I see it, it slows you down and it stops you from actually being able to do the job properly. So there's something to keep in mind. That's the way I think about it anyway. And yeah, just continuing on, more blocking with the 80 grit. Prior to actually priming, I like to finish off with 180 grit. It's a good, nice grit to finish off with. Sort of 80 grit, 120 grit, sort of 120 could be okay over filler, but over paint you'd probably want to take that paint back to at least 180 grit or even 240 grit, sometimes 320, but on a full repaired panel like this, 180 grit is totally fine. And there you go, which is what I'm using here, again on the block. You could use a orbital sander as well. You just have to be careful with those orbital sanders that you don't dig into your repairs, because you can actually end up making them worse. You can have them feeling really nice in 80 grit, and then you go over it with the orbital sander and you can actually end up ruining your repairs. So yeah, it's a good idea to just go over it with a soft pad if you do decide that you are going to use the orbital sander. So if you haven't already, don't forget to check me out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all that stuff. I think I've got, it's all in the description of my video, so check out the description underneath my videos, and you can follow the links to all my social media. Always welcome to put comments down. I'll do my best to get back to you guys. Obviously, I don't have the time to get back to everyone. This channel's grown quite big in a small amount of time. And yeah, big thumbs up to all you guys for following me, and thanks for hitting those thumbs up and all the good comments that I get. So anyway, just continuing on, I left out most of the footage for the back section of this boot lid, but again, that was just mainly to stop the vid from getting too long. Not to worry, on with the job. I'm just using an old piece of 180 grit, that old piece that I used to block down the final block down of those repairs. Just using that around the edges to make sure that there's no flaky paint or any rough edges. Also, it's going to make sure we get adhesion. So give it a really good final dust off inside and out, and after that we're going to be taking it into the booth and we're going to get some primer onto it. I'll give you guys a look at the primer I'm using and yeah, take you guys through every single step to get the inside of this painted and also primed up. I left the paint section of this video, paint and polish of the exterior, up to the next video, because this vid sort of got a bit on the long side already, so I decided to break it up into an extra video. Not to worry, you guys aren't going to miss out on any major steps on this VL. I plan on making a full video set on it. So yeah, mix up your 2K primer, 4:1 ratio, and thin as required. Always read can for mixing ratios. So just because most primers are 4:1 doesn't mean they're all 4:1. There are 5:1, there's 10:1, there's 3:1. There's loads of different ratios on your primers. You've also got acrylic primers. You've got loads of different primers out there, but you just want to be using a just a good 2-pack automotive primer filler. High solid is the way to go. Gives you better filling capabilities, less shrink back, and it's easier to sand from my experience anyway. So my first coat, I never go too heavy with that first coat, especially if you're going over what I'm going over with. There's loads of different layers of paint. If you go and smash that first coat on too heavy, you can sort of see those rings, and that's just the porous filler and also the areas where I've cut through. If you go and put that first coat on too heavy, that's going to react, and you'll actually still be able to see that same edge mapping once you put your colour on. So yeah, once you've left that first coat dry right out, it's pretty important to let that first coat dry right out. Again, that's going to also help getting any shrink back as well. We'll go and put our first heavy coat on, and from here on we're only putting heavy coats on. This time I decided to use 5 coats, just because it was still a little bit ripply. I like to use a 1.8 to 2.2 mil for most automotive high build primers. I wouldn't like to go much above that. I have used 2.5 before, but they're probably just put it on a little bit too orange peely, and you're forever blocking that orange peel out. And if you get those apprentices that don't sand their stuff properly, they end up leaving the orange peel in there, and you can actually see that through once you've got your top coat colour on. Yeah, this stuff I thinned out at a 10%, so the Concept Primer, it's a really great quality primer. It sands down as good as the top brand ones, to be honest. Like, it's around $100 for a kit, which over here in Perth is cheap. You can pay $250 to $300 for some of the top line primers, whereas I'm getting just as good, if not better, results out of this Concept Primer. I've been very happy with the entire Concept No Mix range, and I will be doing a review and demonstration on it. I'm just waiting off because I want to get a bit more experience with it, and I can do a better review on it that way. So I ended up getting those first 2 coats of primer on, and I thought, you know what, why wait until the morning then flip the boot up and do the inside? I thought, shit, I may as well just put the boot on that door stand there and prime the inside at the same time. Saved the clean out of the gun and saved the entry into the booth, so worked out quite well. I just put 2 coats, again, first coat just nice and dry, and then after that just 1 wet coat, because all I was ever doing on the inside there was just hand sanding it. Whoever painted the black on the inside of that boot the first time didn't do very good prep work, because as soon as I got the high pressure air onto it, it just started flaking up all that paint. You could see in those spots where it was peeling back. But I just did my best to remove most of it, sanded the affected areas back, feathered it out, and just re-primed it. It's not a restoration, as I said before. It really is just a nice tidy up, you know. Yeah, anyway, putting another couple of coats on the exterior. Yeah, just obviously because you've got it up on the angle now, you're going to be a bit more prone to run, so maybe just hold off just a touch. But I still obviously want that good build up on it. Another good thing to do is if you're repairing and priming and stuff like that, once you get that first coat of, or first couple of coats of wet primer on, you can actually get that will also simulate the wet look, so you can have a look down the side of that panel when it's wet, and you'll be able to take note if there's a high spot or a low spot. It turned out there was a couple of little ripples in it, but I was more than happy with how it turned up in the end. So yeah, look, I probably should have said 2 to 5 coats depending on repairs, but I said 4 to 5 because this was actually a decent sized repair. If it was just a tiny little repair, I was using fine fill on it, you'd probably just be able to put 2 coats on it, give it a hand scuff back, and if there was no highs or lows, and that would probably suffice. So anyway, I've left that overnight. I think I left it for a couple of days actually. I've then, before I paint the inside, I did decide I wanted to block the outside, because if I was to cut through any of that, I'd like to put a bit more 2-pack primer on it before I painted the inside, rather than possibly having a bit of that overspray hit the inside. So that's the reason I did it in this order. And I'm just using that longer speed file this time, because I'm wanting to sand the entire panel. Before I used the short one because it was more contained just to those areas where I had that filler, but this time I'm wanting to sand over the entire panel, do nice big long block strokes, and yeah, for a repair like that I would not touch 240. 240 is too fine, it's not going to cut through and it's not going to get it as nice and flat. And next up, I've just got the what I was telling you guys about before, the Prepsol or wax and grease remover in that atomizer bottle. As I said before, you could swap that just for a rag of wet Prepsol, but I find these things actually end up using less, and they're just convenient too. Just spray that over the entire thing, and you can see here that it's giving me the simulating the gloss that you would get once you've got your paint on it. And yeah, I'm quite happy with how it's blocked down. So next up, I'm going to be flipping it upside down and just scuffing it down so I can paint the inside first, because I didn't want to paint the inside and the outside at the same time on that boot lid. And that's the reason I was blocking it, because I was doing more primer on these couple of parts here that I did a few repairs on. However, I didn't include any of the footage for that front bumper bar. There was a lot of fiberglassing, and that spot there was just a bit high. I skim filled the entire front bumper bar, so that thing should look mint when it's done. It was pretty average before, but I primed it up once, and anyone who's done any fiberglass parts will know exactly what I'm talking about, that they're prone to getting pinholes, and yeah, I'm never really bothered if I have to prime a fiberglass part twice. Being that they've already been painted, that did work in my favour, but there still was a couple of spots that I wasn't happy with on that front bar. So there it is all, once it's all been primed up. The front bar, because it had already been done once, it only really got one coat over the cut throughs and then two sort of thinner coats over the entire thing just to seal it down, so I've got a nice surface. And since this video I've actually prepped that entire front bar up and it's ready to go. So yeah, I've sped this section up just to 1.5 times. And I'm just using 320, so this is a good example of how you actually can paint over 320. Look, I wouldn't do it on an exterior panel because there's a possibility you may see a sanding scratch or two, but it absolutely worked fine for the inside. You know, if you're worried about getting sanding scratches, you could go over the top of your 320 grit with some 500 grit, or you could just go straight out with the 400 grit. But yeah, you actually can paint over the 320 grit. However, it's not really recommended, as I say. And next up, we've got it in the booth. I gave it a good dust off, and this is the paint that I'm using, the DuPont Centari, Cromax they call it now, Centari 6000 range. It is a 3:1 ratio with thinners. We've just got a universal thinner that we use there. It's a Duxone one that we've got there at the moment, and it can be used in base coats and clear coats and anything, primers, across the board. It's just a 2K uni thinner, which is nice and simple. It's annoying sometimes when you get those paint systems when they've got 10 different reducers, and it just gets a little bit confusing, especially for the apprentices, and they get them all mixed up. So I do like using just a universal thinner. So next up, obviously make sure you always strain all your paint. That's through from primers to clears, base coats. No matter what paint I put in my gun, I always strain it. I always like to run a gun filter inside the gun as well, just last line of defense if anything else has managed to get through. And then I also skipped out on the wax and grease remover stage on the inside of this boot. Again, it actually shows that you can paint stuff without wax and grease removing, and painting over 320 on a light metallic, and you can actually still get good results. If I was to have, say, a really dirty air supply that had oil coming through the lines, then I'd probably want to give it a good wax and grease remove first. But even then, yeah, if it's coming through the lines, you're probably most likely to get silicon or fish eyes in your paintwork, which sucks. Anyone who's had it will know that's a pretty terrible thing to have to deal with in a paint shop. I've worked with a couple of shops, and yeah, pretty bad silicon problems. But I guess in a way it makes you a better painter, because it teaches you ways to get around it. So if I was to get, say, fish eyes in my base coat, I'd just let it dry right out, and I'll just put really dry, dusty coats on until we've got rid of it, and then we just put our clear coat on. Yeah, it's a good way to get rid of it in your base coat. So that's the first coat down. I just gave that about 3 or 4 minutes because the first coat wasn't too heavy. I just got the air and just blew it on there to help dry it down. It's solvent-based base coat, so it's drying nice and quick. Second coat, we've basically got our coverage, which is pretty good for a colour like this, a light silver. It's got a very fine metallic aluminium flake in it. So I've actually found the finer the silver, the better coverage you're going to get, because they need to put less binder into that colour to float those big metallics like they do in the big flakes. So yeah, that's the second coat down. Again, just give that, after this coat, I'll give it a good 5 minutes. I'll just walk away, go have something to eat or something, go outside. Obviously keeping yourself clean in between coats always. I prefer not to leave the booth once I've started painting, but it's cooling down over here in WA. It's sort of coming into winter. So yeah, sometimes I just have to walk away and forget about it. I'm going to actually be making a few videos in the near future that will help you, all the little methods that I know to help spray painting in the colder environment. So I know not everyone has a spray booth, and my spray booth I have one, but it doesn't have a heat cycle, it doesn't have a burner in it, so it definitely does bring forward a whole new set of issues, but there are ways around it. Little things like warming up your clear. You run the kettle or the hot water tap, or you boil some water, put it into the sink, get your clear coat, put that in there, so you've warmed that clear up to say 30 or 40 degrees. You then mix it up, and then that will basically dry a lot quicker and help stop getting some runs, which I've found is a very good thing to do in winter, but I'll go through that in another video. I'm mainly just going to be focusing on painting the inside of this boot lid. So once I'm happy I've got those 3 coats of base coat down, I'm happy I've got coverage, obviously inspecting along the way, I'm going to be giving my gun just a quick flush out. Look, for the inside of a boot lid, I'm not even going to bother about using a dedicated clear gun. In that little bottle there, that's a gun wash I've got in there, so I've just got some gun cleaning solvent in there. I'm just going to give it a quick flush through, just back pressuring it here. That's going to get the bulk of that base coat out. Then just tip that thinners back out. I always like to wipe that rim of the top of the spray gun, because it's prone to get a little touch of thinners up there, and you can actually get pot drips. Trust me, it's happened a few times before and it's quite annoying. And yeah, next up I'll just be able to mix up my 2K clear, and I'm using some Duke Zone 2K clear, and it's quite good. I mean, I've had good results so far. I did my echo in it, and I'm yet to see it delaminate, I'm yet to see it dull off, and we do live in WA over here. We've only been here for a few years, but I don't always necessarily get to see the cars I paint 3 years later, so I don't always get to see how they hold up. So it'll be interesting to see how my own car holds up with this clear. Oh, it's in the right hands. If it doesn't hold up, all it gets is another respray. And there you go. What the hell are you doing, Gunman? That's not Duke Zone hardener. That's yeah, that's concept hardener. Can you do that? Yeah, of course you can. It works. It's all the same stuff. I mean, yeah, it's not warranted. No one's going to warrant it, but 2K hardener is 2K hardener. I've actually got a lot of different clears sitting around, and I might even just throw a couple together. I've done it before, and it does work fine. I've got a bit of DNA clear sitting there, a bit of Metalax Platinum clear, and yeah, just some DuPont clear, and even some of this Duke Zone clear. I might just whack them together and do a bit of an experiment, maybe paint my bonnet with it, and then just see how that holds up. You know, use my own car as a guinea pig. Come back to it in a year or 6 months, and I'll show you guys how it's looking. So there you go. Just again, always using a strainer. Can't underestimate how important it is to use a strainer. And then yeah, made sure I left that. I just went out for probably 10 minutes because it's quite cold before I put my clear coat on. I wouldn't usually paint an exterior panel like this with an MS clear, because this Duke Zone is an MS clear. But I'm just going just a quick dust coat followed by a wet coat, and I'm calling it good. Yeah, on an exterior panel I want to put one full, nice closed coat over it, walk out for say 5 to 10 minutes, come in, put another nice heavy coat over it, and then that would be done. But for the inside of the panel, this isn't going to see any sunlight, it's not going to be seeing much daylight at all, and for the inside it's all it's really going to need. Yeah, this clear, don't run thinners with it. It says on the tech data sheet that you can run up to 5% reducer with it. I would probably only do that in the colder months when it gets thicker. I do actually have another video that teaches you guys how to use a viscosity cup so you can actually get your clear to the exact right thickness. So the name of this colour is Panorama Silver, paint code is 2B053, and Holden will be the manufacturer if you guys decided that you liked it enough that you wanted to search for it. The car that this colour was on was a Walkinshaw, they called it. So basically Tom Walkinshaw was a British race car driver, and he basically made his own version of a VL, and yeah, they were pretty over the top. I'll put a link in the description of this video if you guys would like to learn a little bit more about the Walkinshaw, Tom Walkinshaw and the Walkinshaw model, and also the VL Commodores in general. So there you go, I'm pretty happy with it. You can still see like a few of those low spots and stuff like that. It's not perfect on the inside, but as I say, you're not really going to be admiring it. As long as it's the right colour on the inside there, I'm happy. As I said before, next video is going to be the painting the exterior of the boot and the polishing stage, and get you up to where this footage is here. Hang around at the end. I've put a couple of links to a couple of my other videos. There's a Standox review and demonstration, which that paint system got a couple of big thumbs up from me, and then there's also a video of another restoration job that I did on a HQ Holden Ute, which is the 75 Holden Ute painted in black. That one came up real nice too. So thanks for watching, and this has been another Gunman production. Bye.